Welcome. Hi, my name is Dr. Brianna Sherrow, and this presentation is on 6-syllable types and phoneme-grapheme mapping. Let's get started. By the end of this class or presentation, you should be able to do 4 different things. You should be able to identify the 6-syllable types in words. You should be able to divide words into their syllables. You should be able to phoneme-grapheme map words, and then you should be able to count phonemes in words. We've been counting phonemes before now, but I just want you to be able to get some extra practice in counting those phonemes. Additionally, that skill is used in phoneme-grapheme mapping. Before we start our presentation, though, you do need to make sure you have printed or downloaded the graphic organizer on 6-syllable types with the mnemonic Clover. I've created this for you as sometimes it is difficult for students to remember the 6-syllable types. You might think about doing something like this for your students, especially students with disabilities, but not just students with disabilities. This is a good practice for all students. Using this graphic organizer, you can take notes as I go along and talk about each of the syllable types. First and foremost, why do we teach what syllables are, or what the 6 different syllables are for our students? Even though I'm teaching you what the 6 syllables are, when we work with students and we look at phonics, we need to teach them 6-syllable types because students need strategies to be able to attack words they don't know. Also, the 6-syllable types provide students a strategy for decoding words and reading words. Our 6-syllable types that we have are closed, open, vowel combinations, also known as vowel team, are controlled, vowel-consonant+e, also known as magic E, consonant-le. These are all of our 6-syllable types, and we will go into more detail on each syllable here. Let's first start with closed syllables. A closed syllable is a syllable having a short vowel, and it ends in a consonant. So essentially, we're talking about a word, and then breaking apart into syllables. But actually, before I continue, let me back the bus up here, as I might say. Take a look at your Clover graphic organizer. I haven't quite described what a syllable is. Well, a syllable is a word or part of a word with only one vowel sound. So when we look at words and we move on to breaking words into what we call a syllable, you should know that each syllable only has one vowel sound. So if we have a word that only has one vowel sound, it's only going to have one syllable. Keep that in mind as we move ahead. Now, let me get back on track here. Like I said previously, a closed syllable is a syllable having a short vowel and ending in a consonant. So, this has one vowel, and it's followed by a consonant. The vowel is short. For example, in the word mug. Other examples would be cat, sled, cramp, or the word cabbage. Now the word cabbage here has 2 syllables because as you can see, we have more than one vowel. The first syllable in cabbage is a closed syllable, C-A-B. Also is the word cab, like if you're going to hail a taxi, another word for taxi. Our next syllable is an open syllable. An open syllable has a long vowel sound that is spelled with a single vowel letter. So we're talking about a long vowel at the end of a syllable. So that would be he, over, but we're just looking at the O because over has 2 syllables, or table, the T and the A, that's an open syllable because we have a long vowel at the end. And bunny has 2 syllables, the N and the Y. Remember, Y can sometimes be a vowel, and in this case it's a long vowel. So keep in mind. These examples all had more than one syllable. But we also have words such as he that can only have one syllable, and it is also a word at the same time. But he is an open syllable. Next up, we have what we call vowel combinations or vowel team. Essentially, it's exactly how it sounds. It's two vowels with one sound. So two vowels are teaming up together to make one sound together. So this is a syllable with a vowel combination. Think of it as two vowels teaming up together with one sound. And these are some of the spellings we might see, but there are others as well. A-I, O-A, E-A, or O-I. Words that contain our vowel team could be eat, bow, or boat. Then we have what we call R-controlled syllables. This is a syllable with a vowel combination, such as, and it's spelled A-R-E-R-I-R-O-R-U-R. And this is when a vowel is paired with the letter R, but we get a different sound, such as in the word barnyard. We essentially call this a bossy R. Why? Because it takes over the sound of your vowel. The R does. So if you think about the word star, you're not really hearing what sound that A is making. We have car, which has R controlled, as well as port. So that has two syllables in one word, and they're both R controlled. Additionally, in the word perfect, if we break it apart into two syllables, the per, P-E-R, is R controlled because the R is being bossy and taking over the vowel. But the other part of perfect, the F-E-C-T, fect, is not an R controlled syllable. Then we have vowel-consonant+e on your handout, known as magic E. Why is it called a magic E, you might wonder? Well, let's first define what it is. It's a syllable with a long vowel sound, with a consonant sound, and a final E. Reason why it's called a magic E is because the E is silent, but what makes it magical is that the E makes the vowel say its name. So, if we look at the word ate, or lake, or proceed, but we're looking at the second part of that word. Additionally, if we were to look at the word made or make, we have that magic E that's making the vowel in that syllable say its name. That's what makes it magical. Next up, we have consonant-le, and this is a final syllable containing a consonant before we see the letter combination le. This can be found in the word table, the second syllable, or in the word apple, as well as the second syllable in that word as well. This comes at the end of the word. We see the consonant le at the end of the word. And if we think about the word turtle, it's making that ooh sound. Turtle. So, when I think about these different 6-syllable types, as a teacher you might wonder, where do I start? Where do I begin? Well, I have that information for you. We want to start with closed and open syllables. Why, might you ask? Well, first and foremost, they are the easiest to master for students. What I mean by easiest to master is they're easy to identify. Even when you guys are learning about these 6-syllable types, I bet those will be the first two you're going to be able to identify correctly most of the time, and you're going to be able to master. Before you master our controlled syllables, vowel team, consonant-le, all those other ones, open and closed are going to be the easiest for you to identify and master. Also, many common words can be constructed with just these 2-syllable types alone. And so by teaching our students these 2-syllable types first, we're going to be able to help them with a lot of common words. Additionally, when we think about closed syllables comprise just under 50% of the syllables in running text. That's a lot of syllables for one syllable type. And so that's why we look at those first and teach those first. Additionally, when we're teaching students how to break apart syllables and identify them, the first thing we want to do is start with words that only have one syllable. And then we'll move to two syllables, and then obviously we can increase it from there. But this way of chunking it helps the student begin to understand that longer words are made up of smaller parts and that they're manageable chunks or syllables and they can be broken apart. When we are working on those bigger words that have two syllables, we want to divide between the two middle consonants. And so I have an example here for you. And I also started with the closed syllable type as I modeled and talked about in my previous slide. So if we have the word magnet, magnet has two syllables. You can even clap it out if you're not sure. Magnet. So we want to separate that. What are they? Well, the first part is spelled M-A-G. Then we add that with net. So putting those two together gets our word magnet, but it does have two syllables and they are both closed syllables. Why closed syllables? Remember from before, I said it comprises just under 50% of the syllables in running text. Here are some other examples of words with two closed syllables. We're not going to go through them, but I did want you to be able to see them. So magnet, I showed you that one. Publish, traffic, problem, mascot, mitten, trumpet, napkin, hot dog, tablet, frantic, and droplet. Also, when we think about syllable division, there could be some guidelines you can use as well. And so when I go through these, I want you to know that the V represents vowel and C represents consonant. So on the first one here, it says vowel, consonant, consonant, vowel. So for this one, if two consonants come between two vowels, we divide between the consonants. The first vowel will be short, like in the word butter, as you can see, and the dot identifies where my syllable breaks, or where my word is broken apart by different syllables. So in the word butter, we have two syllables. Then, with vowel, consonant, 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 vowel, we keep blends and digraphs together when dividing syllables. So you look at the word athlete, take a look at where we divide that. Then with vowel, consonant, 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 vowel, that's a mouthful, we divide between words in the compound word. So if we have the word longhand, we actually have two words in that word. And so that's where we're going to divide it. And then if we look at our consonant plus LE, or we're looking at a vowel R, we want to keep these combinations together. So we look at table, that BLE stays together, and we look at worthy, the WOR, so our vowel, and our R staying together. Those are just some guidelines. Next up, let's talk about phoneme-grapheme mapping. And so you had a reading this week that was on phonics and spelling through phoneme-grapheme mapping. Well, explicit phoneme-grapheme mapping is one way to teach students about sounds, also known as phonemes, in words, and the letters, remember letters can be graphemes, that represent them. So essentially, this is how we can teach students about the phonemes in words and the letters or graphemes that go with them. And students have to attend to the internal details of words and understand how letters are used to represent each of the speech sounds. This awareness, as a result, helps students remember words for reading, spelling, and vocabulary. When students develop insight into word structure and the ability to think about words, their reading, spelling, and use of words will improve. And this is from Catherine Grace in our phonics and spelling through phoneme-grapheme mapping. So, when we think about phoneme-grapheme mapping, what should we look at? Well, we should begin with regular words where the number of phonemes equals the same number of graphemes. So that means we have the same number of letters as we have sounds. So if we take the word cat and we segment that, k at. There's 3 letters and there's 3 sounds. We can introduce blends. Remember that blends are when 2 or more consonants are blended together, but each sound is heard in the blend. Blends can come at the beginning of words, such as in the word globe, or they can come at the end of the word, such as last. Then we want to introduce digraphs. Digraphs are a combo of 2 letters that represents 1 sound. So if you look at the beginning letters, PH, in the city Phoenix, that first beginning letters, PH, represents 1 sound, which is like as in fish. But it's spelled very differently than in fish. And our digraphs, remember, are written in 1 box. Why? Well, because they represent 1 sound. And in phoneme-grapheme mapping, 1 box equals 1 sound. And so we always write the letters that represent that 1 sound in that box. We'll get more on this later. Then we want to introduce those silent letters, such as talking about those syllable types like magic E or vowel-consonant+e. And then we want to introduce our vowel digraphs. So earlier when I was talking about digraphs, I was talking about consonant digraphs. Now it would be vowel digraphs, so those vowel teams that make 1 vowel sound. So they team up together and make 1 vowel sound. Well, when we look at phoneme-grapheme mapping, additionally, we need to think about what skills do students need to have in order to do this. First, they should be able to orally segment words containing up to 3 phonemes. So you could say, tell me the sounds in wave. They need to be able to auditorily blend 3 phonemes, such as k, to get the word cup. They need to be able to delete initial, final, and medial sounds in orally presented words. So if I say cat without the k, say mate without the t, say break without the r. They need to be able to accurately recognize and produce letter sounds. Students would look at flashcards and then they would be able to tell the person giving the flashcard the sound of the letters. What does the letter make? What sound does it make? And then they should be able to distinguish between and among short vowel sounds. So cop versus cap, and then saying which sound belongs in each word. And students benefit from phoneme-grapheme mapping when they have these prerequisite skills. If they don't have these skills, it's really difficult for them to phoneme-grapheme map. Also, they need to be able to give individual speech sounds for consonants and digraphs, so not just plain old letters by themselves. Like I said, blending, say, 3 phonemes to make a word, to substitute a single sound to make a new word. I just kind of simplified it a little bit more here. To segment words into 3 sounds. With cues, they can identify a short vowel sound in a word, and they can name all the letters. And they can read 50 to 100 words by sight. And so in phoneme-grapheme mapping, essentially, when we are saying a word, we're asking students to think about what do they hear. We want them to say the sounds, not the letters, and then we want them to write the letters that represent those sounds. And 1 chip, or say 1 square, represents 1 sound. And so when we look at this, I'm going to show you in the next slide. That'll make a lot more sense. Let me just move on. So this additionally builds on phonemic awareness, and phoneme-grapheme mapping builds the bridge between sounds and letters. So remember, in English, we don't have a one-to-one correspondence like other countries do. 1 sound does not equal 1 letter in the English language. It's very difficult and complex. So let's take the word sheep. Well, if I was working with a student, I would ask the student, what do they hear? And so we'd want them to give me the sounds. And we would use chips, coins, pennies, whatever they might have. And so then I will listen to the student. Sh, e, p, sheep. And so it has 3 sounds in the word sheep, and then I would tell them, what do you write? And so the student would say the grapheme, so here we're talking about the letters, and then they would move the tile up and write the grapheme in the square. Just so you could see here, I put the graphemes below our tiles or our chips. So SH represents our first phoneme, our first sound. EE represents our medial middle sound, and the P is our ending sound here. Let's take a look at a few more. So if I gave the student sing, how could we segment that out? What would you hear? And you can do this with me. S, E, G. Then we have sing. So S represents the first phoneme. The I is our next phoneme. And the last phoneme is NG. Then we have the word stop. S, t, p, stop. S is our first phoneme. T is our next phoneme. O is another phoneme. And our fourth phoneme is P. I'm doing this to kind of show you what might happen with students, but we will do it a little more in real time in a little bit when you're practicing. Then if we have the word brain, we would want to have them use the chips to segment that out. Since I'm getting a little longer, I'm not going to do this here with you, but I did want to show you. And then we have the word cheese. And then one more, just so you can see, is stamp. We have 5 phonemes. And in this word, every letter represents a phoneme. Alright, so let's take the word mat. So the teacher would map the phonemes in Phoneme-Grapheme Mapping. So, at. Then we'd want to count the phonemes, and then, if needed, help the student. At, mat. And then we would want them to add the graphemes. So take away our chips and be able to write our letters. When we're first starting with this, usually we're teaching the new sounds, the spelling concept and pattern. We're also having students segment our word, but when we first start, we'll segment it for them with the sounds, not being written, but just out loud. And then we'll have the students show us the tiles, how many sounds they hear. And then they will write the letters. But there's also other ways to work up to this, as you saw in your reading. I'm kind of simplifying this a little bit for presentation's sake. So, if I take the word string, there's our phonemes. We have 5 phonemes because our N and our G go together to make a one sound. So we have string. Then if we look at the word happy, H-A-P-E. Then we have our letters, H, A, both pieced together, and then a Y. Minus our tiles, you're going to be doing something like this on our quiz this week, and you will need to be able to tell me how many phonemes are in the word. So how many sounds do you hear? And then you need to be able to write the graphemes in the boxes, like I've done here for the word happy. So, how do I explicitly teach PGM or Phoneme-Grapheme Mapping? Well, I introduced the new concept. I'm going to segment words or syllables into phonemes by moving one tile for each phoneme. You're going to provide systematic practice and opportunities for generalization. So generalization meaning they can additionally work beyond skills they're using to other words, not just on that word. We're going to use that Phoneme-Grapheme Mapping paper that has all those squares on it. Then a student should be able to summarize the concept in their own words. Then we're going to introduce more complex words. And then we're going to practice reading and writing words with the target Phoneme-Grapheme pattern. So I want you to do some practice here. I'll do 2 with you. And then you'll do 2 on your own. So if we have the word wing, how many phonemes are in the word wing? Or what sounds do you hear? I've also written the sounds out for you with slashes. This is how we represent sounds, remember, not letters. That's sounds. So we have w, e, n, wing. So we have 3 phonemes. It's a W, an I, and NG is our last phoneme. Then if you take the word 5, how many phonemes are in 5? What do you hear? Yeah. Oh, I lost the last one. So we have 5. We have an F, an I, and then the V and the E. 5. Remember, on magic E's or making the vowel say its name. Now you practice with these 2, letter and table. What do you hear? How many phonemes are there? And what do you write in the boxes? If you need to pause the presentation, feel free to go ahead and do so. Next up, though, I'm going to show you the key to these. So we take the word letter. The swoops represent syllables. We have 2 different syllables in this word, and I'm underlining the E in let. And so that would be how you phoneme-grapheme map letter. And here's table. And we have the swoops as well. And then we don't hear our E, and it's silent and it's crossed out. This is just how we represent different syllables in writing. I'm not expecting you to be able to code it or write these things or have your swoops, but swoops do help for syllables, actually, or dividing your syllables, but just wanted you to be able to see that in case you saw something like that. Online, you do need to go check out some additional activities I have planned for you this week instead of watching videos by Dr. Motes. And so your first practice that I suggest you do, although it's not in this order online, is 6-syllable type practice. You'll go online, you'll download the handout, and this handout will have words written, and you need to be able to break apart your syllables. So in your box, divide it into syllables. Use a slash to separate your syllables in this. And then you're going to tell me the type of each syllable. Additionally, when you are done, check the key online. Don't use the key until after you've gone through the entire handout yourself. Then your final activity will be Phoneme-Grapheme Mapping. There's a worksheet. You're going to work on this. It's going to have you circle which division is correct for syllable. So your first up word is dolphin. So which syllable division looks correct there? Just like on your previous activity with 6-syllable types and identification, you're going to write the syllable and the syllable type. But the extra thing here is you're going to map the phonemes. So you're going to write the sounds. That's what map the phonemes means. And then your graphophonemic spelling is how we spell it. Remember, 1 box per 1 sound. If you have any questions, please email me. Make sure you have completely watched this presentation and completed your activities before taking your quiz this week. Thank you for listening.